21 years when I wrote this song. I'm 22 now, but I won't be for long. People ask me when will you grow up to be a man, but all the girls I love at school are already pushing prams. I loved you then as I love you still. Though I put you on a pedestal, they put you on the pill. I don't feel bad about letting you go. I just feel sad about letting you know. I don't want to change the world. I'm not looking for a New England. I'm just looking for another girl. I don't want to change the world. I'm not looking for a New England. I'm just looking for another girl. Hello, vinyl community. Mazzy here with the archivist, Amanda.
Hi.
And hello, Amanda. Hello, archivist. We're gonna do a feature. This is a feature. You already know it because you read it. This is a feature on Billy Bragg. So it may get somewhat political. It may get somewhat social. So warn you, mooks out there that don't like to dive into political music, social music, music with social overtones. Basically following the career of Billy Bragg, and we'll tell you who he is and who his influences were. Just a little chat about him. Now, this shirt does not necessarily reflect any political candidate or party that I am a part of or necessarily supporting or voting for, but anytime I get a chance to wear a t-shirt with an old Jewish guy on it, I do it. So, welcome.
Cheers.
Okay, Billy Bragg. Where do you start with Billy Bragg, Amanda?
Where do you start with Billy Bragg? Folk songs. Traditional folk songs. That's where you start with Billy Bragg. Billy Bragg kind of actually got exposed to folk songs originally, he said, through listening to Simon and Garfunkel records, and then kind of came around to traditional British folk songs.
Yeah, he jokes about being influenced by the whole folk movement by listening to two Jews out of Brooklyn.
Which is great.
A Jew out of Brooklyn. Maybe that's why I wore this shirt. I didn't even think about that.
Gave it to him as homework, actually. It's a funny story, and that's why he did it. And now it's like published right next to the original version.
Now you can't talk about these artists. You can't talk about Billy Bragg, Woody Guthrie, Pete Seeger without talking a bit about the workers, the union. There's one of my favorite films about early American unions in the turn of the century, or actually the 1910s and maybe into the 20s, was an American named Jack Reed. And Jack Reed, there was a movie that Warren Beatty based on his life called Reds, because Jack Reed was an American communist. And that reminds me, because in the movie version of Reds, there's a whole great scene just before, it's a long movie, so just before the intermission, there's a whole scene where the workers are singing the Internationale. And so the Internationale is a song that is on one of Billy Bragg's records that you should seek it out, because it's a great traditional workers song. And as Amanda said, Pete Seeger encourages him to write his own version of that, you know.
And now it's just as well known as the original, actually.
Yeah. None of this thing was socialism. I mean, we're not going to get into politics of that or the personal stories, the back and forth riffraff of that. But, you know,
Just talking about the course of music and
right. But look at Social
Security,
and Medicare. You know, those are social programs. So mixing in some social programs with democracy, at least in this country and in the UK, to me is not a bad thing. But, you know, I promised myself I wouldn't get into that too much. But there you go.
Yeah, well, I would hold on that. Go this way first.
Okay.
If you want.
Yep.
Yeah.
Take it out of sleeves.
So I guess we'll go through and kind of look at some of his records, and you can. What you got to say, yo?
I first saw Billy Bragg, and it was a surprise performance. I had like a misunderstanding and false memory of him opening for the Clash at the Berkeley Community Theater. But I figured it out. I saw the Clash at the Berkeley Community Theater in '79, and that's obviously far too early to see Billy Bragg. Although Billy Bragg became friends because of his first band, became friends of the Clash, opened for them in the UK. But in America, he opened for Echo and the Bunnymen. I saw him open up for Echo and the Bunnymen at the Berkeley Community Theater because I fell in love with the main frame of this record. This is a 20th or 30th anniversary remastered. There's 2 EPs he did, or 2 short albums, and the songs, The Milkman of Human Kindness, A New England, were 2 songs that I heard and I just fell in love with. He opened up for Echo and the Bunnymen, and the crowd was just swooning for Echo and the Bunnymen, not just Echo. There is no Echo. And Billy Bragg comes out with an electric guitar only, him, a small amp electric guitar, and does these really fast punk-like songs. And just after the first song, won over the audience. They were kind of, opening acts aren't always, don't always get great reception. But he opened up for that show, and I forgot there was a local punk band in the middle of that 3-act set at Berkeley, and I just fell in love with him. But this record, this is a combination of the 2 first EPs, or the first albums, and it's just great. It's very stark. It's very like folk. It's folk punk before we even knew what folk punk was, or Absolutely. That we had a separated genre.
And then he goes into Brewing Up With, and although I had heard that album first, I think the song that really grabbed me the most is A Lover Sings. It's one of my favorites still to this day. I think it's an incredible song. And interesting.
1984.
Sorry, I just saw something.
It's okay. It's 1984. It's engineered by Kenny Jones. This has some more, several, like, still very minimal, but has other artists or other musicians on it a little bit. Now, that first album, as I said, was actually some demos he recorded, and we were talking about this before we went on taping this, that Amanda's going to tell you the story, how he got John Peel for the BBC to play his music.
There's a story that he was listening to the radio and he heard John Peel say that he was hungry, and so Billy ran out and grabbed him like a bite to eat and showed up at the studio with it and his record and was like, I got you some food, here, play my record. And John Peel actually played it at the wrong speed, but then would later go on to play it at the correct speed, and many more times to come. He played a lot. And is that other record in here? The Peel Sessions?
I don't have the Peel section aside from... Oh, there we go, the BBC sessions. We have the BBC record I have here that just came out last year. It was one of my top reissues of the year, and it's his entire overview of the BBC.
So this is great. It has all of the stuff he did for all the different BBC shows, but including the Peel sessions that he did. Yeah, it's really good. The only thing that I would have to say that I missed in this box set was there's not a lot of, almost any text. There's not a lot of writing. I wish that they had included a lot more reflections and information. Unfortunately, that's just me, the archivist. I always want more of that, but Cooking with Vinyl put this out, and it's really good.
The ages of Billy Bragg.
From baby Billy on up.
From young man to senior citizen.
Seasoned professional.
Yes. Okay.
Cool.
He talks about his influences a lot, and he actually wrote a book here, which we're going to show. But one thing he talks about a lot, and in fact, you can maybe show the book here, but roots, radicals, and rockers, and it's kind of the foundation. He talks about skiffle and how skiffle changed the world. Now, us Americans don't know a lot about skiffle, except a lot of our Beatles fans, because the Beatles were very influenced, and George Harrison talks about one of their early main influences, and that's Lonnie Donegan. And in 1954, 1954 is a great year. I was born in 1954. Elvis had his first first record in 1954. And Lonnie Donegan, it's the birth of rock and roll, face it. 1954, rock and roll starts officially. I mean, obviously R&B songs led up to it, people like Louis Jordan and other black artists. But in terms of getting to the masses a little bit, but in the UK,
Is it any wonder that Maslow was born?
In the year. And the Stratocaster guitar was invented in 1954, and the Salk vaccine. So that's why
It's like a
we're not
cosmic,
we're not dead. This is a great This is one of the worst series covers of Pi Records. Horrible cover package, but this is a fantastic sounding double LP set that came out, I think, in the 80s. It possibly came out, late 70s or 80s. 1977. Double record has all the the hits: Midnight Special, Railroad Bill, Washback Cannonball, but it also has Rock Island Line, Stagger Lee, great things. Thing about Lonnie Donegan, Lonnie Donegan in skiffle music was a bridge in the UK. The bridge from traditional trad jazz, big band stuff, the old school of World War II music and post-World War II, before the beat bands like the Beatles and the rest, but they were very influenced by the skiffle, wash basin, guitar, bass type of very simplistic thing. Washboards. I knew it was wash something.
Yeah, they were
wash bash, wash bash cannonball, wash bag. Like Elvis, though, to some people, it's too bad Lonnie Donegan. He was so great, and then after the years passed, once the Beatles hit and all these other bands hit, he sort of just basically was.
Rockabilly went one way, and popular culture went the other.
And he was doing novelty songs, so it became this novelty act in a way, which is really unfortunate. But there was a great interview, if you can find it. I don't know if it's online, with John Peel, or no, it wasn't an interview. They just met, right? John Peel, Lonnie Donegan, and Billy Bragg.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't see that.
Okay. As we were talking, I'm just going to show this because...
Clash were a big influence, and Joe Strummer and Billy became good friends. I think he went to see the Jam, and the Clash played as well, and he was like, oh, damn, we came to see the Jam, but these other guys are pretty awesome too. And that's kind of the first time he saw the Clash play, apparently.
And then they opened for the Clash, the band he had, something and Wiggly.
Yeah, Wiggy.
Wiggy.
Yeah.
We forget the name
Who
of it
was a
right
person who went on to become his tour manager and friend, long time.
We're going to be right back after this. I'm going to take this little break here. But this is, again, the book that he wrote about 2 years ago. Really wealth of knowledge and wonderful overview of early British music and rock and roll, and especially skiffle and how important skiffle was in the British music scene, and actually to the world scene, just because of who and what it influenced. So we'll be right back.
Anyway, seat me on the other side of the toll gate then. The driver shout back down the line to the man. Of course, you don't get what you say now, going home and going down the Rock Island line. She said, but I fooled you, I got pig iron, I got pig iron, I got all pig iron. He said, to your mama, on that Rock Island line, yes, she's a mighty good road. Oh, on the Rock Island line, she's a mighty good road. The Rock Island line is the road to ride, yeah, the Rock Island
Billy Bragg's early albums, or the first few, they get a little complicated with the issues that came out in the UK versus America, later on Sire Records. There was a local record company that Amanda worked for a while. That issue, not even realized, and I wasn't familiar with CD Presents. What is it?
CD Presents. There was a guy in San Francisco that back in the day promoted shows and did recordings of live shows and put out records, and he would license things and put out things, and then also he was kind of like a rival of Bill Graham almost, back when Bill Graham was doing much smaller things than he was doing later on, he's well known for. And when I moved to San Francisco, I ended up working for him. He had 3 different kind of endeavors going on, a nonprofit organization, a reissue record label, and the punk rock orchestra, which he was managing. And I worked for all 3 of those organizations at the same time, and reissuing kind of the live recordings that had never been released under CD Presents that he had been putting on these shows. So I didn't realize that this particular album had been put out by them, or him, but he licensed it and then put it out, and it was released. It says specifically, copyright does not allow this to be sold in South Africa. So he didn't bother. He couldn't get those rights.
Actually,
which I think is interesting.
Actually, the reason a lot of artists did that was during the whole apartheid thing, and most artists, especially someone like Billy Bragg, and I bet you that was stipulated in his contract. Artists didn't want their music sold and released in South Africa. Remember, there was a whole thing about Sun City, that little Stevie put on that benefit. This is when Mandela was still in prison and things. So it could have been that political thing. Opposed to that, apparently this guy was a bit of a shyster.
He was a total shyster.
Okay. Well, Billy Bragg didn't.
Billy Bragg would have been pissed.
Yeah, and maybe he was. We don't know that. But but Billy Bragg again didn't have major distribution until here, when later I think it was Sire maybe, but this is Elektra Records, so the WEA group. This was distributed on on Elektra Records. Again, it was his company through Elektra.
Well, it was Go, and then
Right.
kind of up to yeah.
And again, there's some mixed hybrid. And later we're not going to do now. We're going to talk about these CD boxes. That kind of puts things in a better perspective and order-wise. So I would say his catalog's a bit of a mess for a while. It doesn't reflect on the music. Talking with the Taxman about poetry. Great cover. Great. Again, the whole thing about capitalism and money grubbing. But what's great about this record is Christy McCall, who did New England and unfortunately had an untimely death. She's the voice, if you know the great Pogues Christmas song, Fairy Tale in New York. She's the woman singing on that. Love her music. I have a great section of her on compact disc. And she did a great version of that and added a verse.
Yes, she added a verse, and now he always sings her version with the added verse in honor of her passing.
And also on this album is the great guitarist Johnny Marr from the Smiths.
Which is funny because he says Americana music is country music for people who like the Smiths.
I love the fucking Smiths.
I do too, but I love that as like a kind of a descriptor. I think that's great. That's a perfect way to describe Americana music, at least modern Americana, not what we think of as traditional Americana.
And if you look at Billy Bragg on Wikipedia or anyone else, it says he's folk music, folk punk music. They even put him in the Americana category because he has done some things which we'll jump into a little later.
Yeah.
That's a comp.
Back to Basics comp, which is a really good like, if you want to get all the hits in one album, I would say get this one. Try and find it if you can.
Yeah, it's actually, again, some EPs put together and things.
Right.
You know, again, it's a fucking mess, this catalog there, until the compact disc era.
The roots of urbane folk music. I don't know if you can see that right there, but I think that's fun.
Because this has Life's a Riot with Spy versus Spy, Brewing Up, Between the War, and the Between the Wars EP.
So it's a lot of EPs
it's
put
some
together.
Exactly. Some of the things we showed before independently, again, Elektra Records packages up and puts out.
Workers' Playtime. I think you get...
The workers, unite.
Yeah.
The proletariat.
Yeah. 1998.
Communism, hypnotism, and the Beatles.
Whoop, whoop.
Rock music, youth, drugs, brainwashing. This has nothing to do with Billy Bragg, but we're talking about the politics of music and censorship. Marxist minstrels, a handbook of communist subversion of music. I bet you Billy Bragg read this book. I bet you he has a copy of this. Put out by the American Christian College Publications in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Of course.
We need a little entertainment there. We'll be right back after this song.
On march to the Battle of New Orleans at the end of the early British wars. The young land started growing, the young blood started flowing, but I ain't marching anymore. For I killed my share of Injuns in 1,000 different fights. I was there at the Little Big Horn. I heard many men lying, I saw many more dying, but I ain't marching anymore. It's always the young to lead us to the wars, always the young to fall. Now look how we won with the saber and the gun. Tell me, is it worth it all?
The first time I saw Billy Bragg play was actually in an alley in Austin during South by Southwest. It was my second South by Southwest, which would have been mid-2000s maybe, or early mid-2000s, something like that. So, and that was the first time that he had been in the States since I really got into his work, and the first time I was in the same place that he was, and it was an amazing experience. A few years later, he came out with his first new record in some time, and because he had been kind of focusing on kids and family, that sort of thing, comes out with, in 2008, Mr. Love and Justice. And this record is pretty wonderful, except for maybe one song is not his best. But the coolest thing about this record, I think, is that if you buy it on CD, you get two versions, two complete recordings. One is solo and one is with the full band. If you buy it on vinyl, so far they've only released the full band version on vinyl, which I'm sure Record Store Day will rectify before too long. But if the whole record printing thing gets sorted out.
That's another issue.
Yeah, but
This is a beautiful record.
it's a beautiful record, and Maz and I got to see, this is kind of the same era when we started seeing Billy Bragg together.
We saw him twice within about a year's period, like maybe 2 years in a row at the Great American Music Hall. Again, I first saw him opening up for Echo and the Bunnyman. I saw him at a club on Haight Street in San Francisco called the I-Beam, where that's the first time I ever saw him headlining. And then we saw him twice in a row. And I think I saw him once you moved to Austin or to Pensacola, wherever you moved to.
You saw him here.
Well, I was going to
That's
show
more
that with the
recent.
record.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I saw him one more time in San Francisco
Okay.
as a full show. Then I saw him here as an in-store, which I'll get to when we get to that point. But yeah, you're right. As Amanda said, 2 versions of the whole album. Beautiful.
Which is great. And one of the songs on here that I think is probably the best song on here is "In For Me." I actually wrote a best man speech for one of my BFFs and used some of the lines from that song, and it's so good. It's beautiful, beautiful words. He's a great wordsmith. He's a great way of discussing love, and in the same way that it's engaging in terms of politics, he talks about love and relationships with like a really kind of raw, genuine honesty that is still romantic, I think. That's, not, he can write about love, he can write about relationships, but he can write about politics and how to, maintain our rights, and all of that is important because we're humans and we have all these sides to ourselves. And I don't want you to think he's just some political songwriter, because he's not just
He's
a
not.
political songwriter.
And in a way, I don't want to say this is the album where he grows up, because that's bullshit to say it like that. That would cheapen all his earlier music. But it's kind of like this is not the young angry man. Not that he was all
He's
angry.
kids and they're
He's grown up. This reminds me, and it doesn't sound anything like it, but I would put this again, it's more personal, less political, although, as Amanda
still
said,
political
overtones. But it reminds me of John Hyatt's record with Have a Little Faith in Me. It's got this folky R&B, like soulful, like a south of soulful, white soul, but stacked, so almost like Otis Redding, and when he sings his ballads, that type of thing. Again, he sounds nothing like Otis Redding, either of these artists, but it has that kind of southern, smoky, soulful folk thing, which I think
especially
is really
Sing
beautiful.
Their Souls Back Home.
Yeah.
That song, I think, touches into the work that he does next.
You Make Me Brave.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We're for Clem. Billy. Okay, let's move on.
So next,
Now shit happens differently. Well, I'm just going to show this book as we lead into this next thing. 26 songs in 30 days. Woody Guthrie's Columbia River songs. Promised Land in the Pacific Northwest. Greg Vandy on KXP with Donald Pearson wrote this song. This is I wrote this book. The whole tour, Woody Guthrie and the Northwest and anything. I'm going to do a little promo of this book as Amanda starts the next series of Billy Bragg collaborations.
so the next kind of section or chapter in Billy Bragg's releases are the Mermaid Avenue releases, which are unfinished Woody Guthrie lyrics with Wilco backing Billy Bragg. And
This is the only time you'll hear Amanda mention Wilco in her entire life. I had to throw in there. Shout out to the Long Box, or the Long Song. What's his name? The Wilco, Mr. Wilco, your friend. The Long Cut.
The Long Cut, yes. So Nora Guthrie has these boxes of unfinished Woody Guthrie lyrics, and connects with Jeff Tweedy from Wilco, and Billy Bragg gets together with them, and 3 records come out.
Wasn't there a thing that Dylan wanted to record these? Is that a rumor?
No, it's totally true. Yes,
And what
he
I-
was.
You think Dylan would get first dibs on Woody Guthrie stuff, but I don't know.
He thought that too.
Wow. Bobby.
I believe, actually, that spurs the memory. Bob Dylan's Chronicles 1 actually mentions Billy Bragg, and I believe it is regarding the discussion of why Bob Dylan didn't do Mermaid Avenue.
That was a controversial. I didn't want to bring up old wounds, Bobby. Sorry, Bobby. Bobby, Robert Zimmerman,
Sorry, Bobby D.
another old Jew. If you're watching this, Mr. Dillon,
Sorry.
sorry.
But these albums, you've either heard or you're missing out. All are amazing, all three of them.
I think the third one was the leftover stuff.
Yeah, I think it's the outtakes and.
But you need them all if you're into this thing. And I'm big Billy. I like Wilco a lot. I'm not like obsessed with Wilco and the whole Uncle Tupelo thing. But I think they were a cool combination. I even heard, which we don't want to get into too much gossip because we just did the Dylan gossip. But I heard there was some friction with Wilco and Billy Bragg about all this.
Yes, and
But-
I think it's known. I don't know that it's gossip per se, but when Billy Bragg went around to kind of play these songs on tour, he created the Blokes to be his backup band instead of Wilco because there was some disagreements regarding mixes and I don't know whatever else. But interestingly, in the Blokes, he got Ian, what's his last name, from the Faces.
Ian McLaughlin.
Yeah, who is living in Austin to join the Blokes, which is really cool. Austin connection. Tie it all back in. I would have to say there's not really a bad song on particularly this one, but Way Over Yonder in the minor key is hands down one of my favorite on here, easily. Every time I hear it, gives me chills. So good.
And I'm missing here, I can't find it, but I do have a Billy Bragg and the Blokes on compact disc. I don't have it here, but anyway.
Yeah.
Ah.
And then we move into Tooth and Nail, not to be confused with the label.
2013, produced by Joe Henry, which we'll talk about him in a minute too.
Leads into his next release, but yeah, this is a good one. I'm actually less familiar with this album than probably every other album in his catalog.
Recorded in South Pasadena, that doesn't really matter. It's just another good album. I mean, it's a little more personal, but it's also got his Handyman Blues, No One Knows Nothing Anymore, Goodbye, Goodbye, There Will Be a Reckoning. So it gets into the whole, Woody Guthrie influence things. I mean,
Further
again,
down the
Woody
Americana.
Guthrie, I think, is hanging over him all the time. It's that little bubble. You got the devil and the angel for some characters. You got Woody Guthrie here. I wouldn't say you got Lonnie Donegan here because he's not really talking in his ear, but he's got that. And this reminds me, as we talked about the political side and the socialist side and the working man side, I'm going to point out the man who is between Amanda and Mazzy, and that's John Lennon. Because, I mean, coming from, middle class background in Liverpool, not a working class, but on his first album with Working Class Hero, I mean, he embraced that, I mean, if you read in 1970, the famous Rolling Stone, interview, I'd be a fisherman if I could, but I'm not because I'm a fucking genius, Working Class Hero. And I don't know how that ties in, but he's hanging out over our shoulder. So anytime Mazzy can throw in a Beatle connection here, he's going to do it.
Every time. And then we get into an album we both much anticipated, I think, it coming out, Shine a Light, which is harkens back to field recordings. I think I mentioned it at different video, probably once or twice. Big fan of this album.
This is a co-op. It's him and Joe Henry together. Joe Henry produced it. This is when I saw him the last time. He did an in-store at Easy Street Records in Seattle, and I got it autographed by Billy Bragg and Joe Henry. You can see that. And what Amanda was talking about, this is recorded on trains and on train platforms from Chicago to Los Angeles via San Antonio.
So they actually ride trains, the few remaining train lines across the United States, and recorded these songs using kind of that same field recording style, and you can really hear it in the songs. And the songs are very traditional Americana songs.
Midnight Special, Lonesome Whistle, Waiting for a Train, In the Pines, Gentle on My Mind.
Hobo's Lullaby. Yeah, great American songs. And
I love Hobo's Lullaby. It's funny, for me, Hobo's Lullaby, the first time I ever heard that song was the title album. Arlo Guthrie, Woody's son, one of Woody's sons, does that song beautifully. That's where I first heard it. Then I went back and got the Woody Guthrie out. You know, in that day in late 69 or so, 68, 69, I didn't have any Woody Guthrie records. And we all knew growing up, my generation, we'd sing in school, This Land Is Your Land, the great Woody Guthrie song. But Hobo's Lullaby got me to go back. Woody, his son, Arlo Guthrie, got me to go back and through Alice's Restaurant and some of his songs, go back to his father's songs that he covered on several of his albums. Another song on here, which is not really a train song, but one of my all-time favorite folk songs is Early Morning Rain. And Early Morning Rain closes it out, and that is, oh, okay, this is where it's embarrassing. I'd say it's one of my favorite songs. I can't even remember who the fuck wrote it. In the early morning rain. Oh, it's the Canadian, Gordon Lightfoot, I believe. Am I right there? Anyway, I think Gordon Lightfoot wrote it. Beautiful song, Early Morning Rain. I was on here. But this is just a wonderful, oh. I got a download card. I should give it to someone. If anybody wants a download card, inbox me. First inbox, I think it's still valid. I don't think I've used it. If you want it's like a freebie, because I have the CD as well. I got the CD first for some reason, because I knew I was going to see them in-store.
yeah.
Okay, that's pretty much on the regular albums. I think we're going to switch over after this message from our sponsor for the compact discs.
I just blowed in and I got them Dust Bowl blues. I just blowed in and I got them Dust Bowl blues. I just blowed in and I'll blow back out again.
If you want the weather, you have to take the blame. If sometimes dark clouds fill the sky, it starts to rain. Folks complain, and though your head may tell you to run and hide, listen to your heart and you'll find me right by your side, because I keep faith, I keep faith, I keep faith in you. Yes, I do. I keep faith in you.
Rhino, what a great reissue label, Rhino, part of the Warner Brothers group, WEA group. The great thing about compact discs, you know, we're not going to get into that back and forth here, but other reissues or repackages, extra tracks and things, and great comps. I would say for anyone out there, if you're not going to go into a vinyl thing and you really want a good overview, not the later period, but just all the great stuff, this is a 3 CD set on Rhino called The Essential Billy Bragg.
And it covers the gamut.
I mean, this covers the main stuff. It doesn't have the Woody Guthrie, Mermaid Avenue stuff. It doesn't have the later stuff we were talking about, the more introspective stuff. but in terms of the great folk punk intense thing,
He's known for.
right, and when I say intense, it's not like thrashing intense, but it is in your face a little bit, and it's wonderful. Oh my God, this is such a great record. I got to see if the Internationale is on here. If it's not, Ingrid Bergman is on here. Not the actress, but a song called Ingrid Bergman. And it gives, a great cover he does here. He's done a handful of really amazing covers in his own way. The great song Walk Away Renee. Don't walk away Renee. Dun, 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 dun. Anyway, you don't want to hear me sing, but he does that. We were talking earlier, and I can't find it. He did a great, it made the charts in the UK. He does a great version of the Beatles, She's Leaving Home. It's on a comp called Sgt. Pepper Was My Father, and I can't find, I know I have that on CD. I thought I had it on vinyl too, but a great version. Seek out She's Leaving Home, the version by Billy Bragg. Why didn't they put the Internationale on here? I'm bummed.
I'm sorry. Then 2 other box sets came out later by Yep Rock, put these out. And they came in these long boxes. And if you remember the early days of CDs, you'll remember long boxes, and I think that's great.
And they have great booklets.
Really beautiful booklets that are essentially just the lyrics to the songs, but still really wonderful. And the albums come out like this, and you can see kind of reinterpretations of the original album artwork, which is great, and actually shows the original album at the bottom there.
And they kind of brand it as this Bragg 1983, so you can put it in order and see his progression of recording from 83 to about 89 or 90, no, in the early 90s actually.
And it shows actually, which is great, you can see the original album lineup, and then it shows you what the extra tracks are too. So in terms of like a CD reissue, it does a good way of representing them as honestly, but also giving you as much new like outtakes and extra material in kind of a cohesive way. I think it's really well done.
Upside down.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really go wrong. There's between volume 1 and 2. This one has She's Got a New Spell, and Valentine's Day is Over. Waiting for the Great Leap Forward. It's an amazing song. And Internationale, the album, which has not only Billy Bragg's version of Internationale, which is important and we keep talking about, but also has I Dreamed I Saw Phil Oakes Last Night, which is a really great song, which is actually kind of a reinterpretation of another song, another like folk song.
The melody is a traditional melody of another song, and he puts his own lyrics about Phil Oakes. Phil Oakes, if you don't know, you should know him. One of the great folk singers of the 60s, the golden voice boy, the opposite antithesis of Bob Dylan, with the rumors of Bob Dylan kicking Phil Oakes out of his limo one time. Rivalry, but Phil Oakes had the golden voice. I Ain't March Anymore. He stuck with his political intensity when Dylan kind of left it out to dry in a way. Not to take anything away from Bob Dylan, he just was going in different directions with his Nashville music and his, pop music, and I hate to say pop, but like a Rolling Stone and other things, and his more poetic lyricist, the less protesty. And Phil Oakes stuck with that to his detriment in a way, you could say, but he stuck to his guns for the most part, maybe up until Pleasures of the Harbor. But this record, I Ain't March Anymore, is a great record, and anybody who's into this kind of music should embrace and check out Phil Oakes. Probably the best, clinically best in a way, but there is soul there, voices of all the folk singers in my opinion. And maybe people didn't want that perfection of vocal style.
still going through this collection. Don't try this at home. Really great. It has Accident Waiting to Happen. I really like that song. And
I think it is a
an
cover.
outtake of Sexuality, which is really great.
And I think it is a cover here of Dolphins, which is the Fred Neil song, which is really wonderful as well.
And it says William Bloke and Billy Bragg and the Blokes, England, half English, which I just mentioned, creation of the Blokes for doing the Wilco, Billy Bragg Mermaid Avenue sessions on tour, but also the creation of this album, William Bloke. I don't remember the story that I was about to tell, so I'm just gonna leave it like that.
That's a pretty much good, big overview. I don't know what else we can really
Yeah.
share. We're big fans of Billy Bragg, and
you
anybody,
tell?
yeah, anybody. We went on way too long, but
Oh, one more thing I do want to say. If you want to hear a lot of Billy Bragg, and you're not really sure if you want to kind of do the investment just yet, check out the Internet Archive, if I can get this to show. The Internet Archive has a ton of great live performances. You can download all of them, listen to them, stream them.
tell them what the Internet Archive is.
That is a big thing. The Internet Archive is essentially not only hard at work archiving the internet itself, but is a digital archive that people all across the world can contribute to. You can archive literally anything, almost. But this particular collection, a lot of these things are actually uploaded by Billy Bragg himself, which I think is interesting because he's a big believer in obviously his licenses and his rights to distribute his work as he sees fit, as he should, but also the fact that he still contributes to access points like the Internet Archive, I think is really important and mindful.
We've tried to put in some music of Billy Bragg, and we don't, as of this recording in this moment, we don't know if that's going to pass. We put a few other things in there from Lonnie Donegan and a couple of the influence things. So if the Billy Bragg, I'm hoping to close out with the Internationale on this video. And obviously, if it doesn't show out, please seek it out. I just want to show these two. These are two DVDs that come in those long box sets. They're live. There's from the South Bank show from 1985, East Berlin in 1986 on this one. This one has Billy Bragg and the Red Stars at Town and Country Club, November 1991, and Billy Bragg at the Broadway Barking, 2006. So there's two DVDs of performance included in those boxes. And I believe those boxes have been condensed. You can probably get them without the long box thing. But again, we love Billy Bragg, political and otherwise, great songwriter, great humanitarian, great, social commentary, and great author and writer. And he's, in a way, a good archivist. I mean, not like this archivist in terms of organizing, or what's the word I'm thinking? Not the archivist. He's more of a historian of the music of Woody Guthrie and of Skiffle and Lonnie Donegan and rock and roll, and so
it's really cool. There's some great interviews with him done with the Library of Congress after when he came to the States, presenting his book, that are great. He tells the stories of the history of that, not only that genre, but how it dovetails into personal stories and things like that, they can be very long, but they're really good. He talks about the oral tradition history, he talks about just kind of the tradition of folk in general and how it's passed down and how it connects into songwriting as a whole. Look that one up, it's great. Not to mention other great interviews.
well, Mazzy and Amanda, the archivist, thank you for watching.
Yeah, thank you.
We love
Thanks,
you.
Stacey.
Take care.
Sky use for your might. Don't cling so hard to your possessions, for you have nothing if you have no rights. Let racist ignorance be ended, for respect makes the empires fall. Freedom is merely privilege extended, unless enjoyed by one and all. So my brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The international knowledge unites the world in song. So comrades, rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. Let no one build walls to divide us, walls of hatred nor walls of stone. Come greet the dawn and stand beside us, we'll live together or we'll die.